Hello and welcome to A Well-Traveled American and Other Mythical Creatures. I'm the titular well-traveled American, Jasper Hudson, and I'm not actually all that well-traveled, but it was a good title, so that's what we're going with. As you can tell, I am not using a great microphone right now. Hopefully that will change as time goes on. Improvements made every day. So, a couple things that I wanted to talk about today on this. I guess it's a podcast. I'm going to try to improve my podcasting skills. That's mostly what this is about. Not so much about the content, but enjoy it while it's here, people. Because someday I might be good at this. In the meantime, here we are. So what I wanted to talk about today was just a little bit about living in Europe, things that I didn't think that I'd end up doing that I've actually done quite a bit of, and things that I thought I'd do more of that I haven't actually done all that much of. So let's start off with the things that I didn't think that I'd do that I actually am doing, because that's the less depressing side of things. I did not think that I'd be learning as much Polish as I have. I mean, it's not really all that much. Pretty much just hello, good morning, how are you, thank you, all that stuff. But probably more than I expected that I would. Dobranoc, good night. That's a good one. I've picked up quite a bit because there is a massive Polish diaspora everywhere in Europe, including where I live in Ireland. So I have learned quite a bit of Polish that way. Just picking it up, asking questions, because I do find that especially with Polish people over 60, 65, they have a hard time learning English. I mean, it's the same way with any language, really. After you get to be about 65, you're going to have a hard time picking up a new language. And a lot of them did move later in life and never really planned on moving. But either their family has moved out here, so now they feel the need to come and be with them, or just, the economics of it has sort of forced them out to this part of the world, far away from home. So, yeah. So I think that is something that a lot of people should do, is try to pick up some Polish, try to pick up some of the language of, one of the larger minorities in your area. Just, it really helps you get along in life, helps you reach out and communicate with more people, identify with more people, and that is important when you are an outsider yourself, a blow-in, as they call it in parts of Ireland. I think that's something that's a piece of advice I'd even call that. Let's see. And I've also gotten sick quite a bit more than I expected. And that's just a natural thing, really. You get sick when you're traveling to and staying in a place where you're not accustomed to. That's new germs, new environment, and then also with Ireland, the dampness I think doesn't really help any of that stuff, lung health wise. So you do end up getting sick more, especially in the first couple of months. I spent pretty much all of last October just completely wiped out. Not this past October, the October before that. And the sickness does different things to you. I guess it's a consequence of it being slightly different, mutations of the virus. You get different kinds of sick. I found it affected my eyes a lot. They tended to crust over in the morning. I could barely open them. That's a lovely image for you listening at home. Yeah, so that's something that has really affected me early on, and it still does occasionally. When I get sick here, it's just very different. I get tired more. I get, like I said, my eyes are affected more. I get like bloody noses sometimes when I'm sick. It never happened to me before. Weird stuff like that, just kind of affecting my body in different ways. Also, I've developed hives when I eat something, and I have not figured out what it is. I do not think it's wheat. I do not think that it's dairy. I've tested that. I have no clue what it is. and my insurance is not great, so I'm not going to find out anytime soon. Um, what else? Teaching English. I did not really think that I'd be doing that. The plan was to become a writer. That was my plan. I was going to be a freelance writer and write for websites and hopefully someday newspapers and all that kind of stuff. And just the more I learned about the industry, the less I wanted to be a part of it. Not necessarily out of like principle exactly, but just the amount of work that it takes. You get paid less than $10 an hour when you're starting out. And that's just, when you actually take into account the amount of time that it takes you to write, because when you're starting out, you are a slower writer, and then the research and that kind of stuff, submission, editing, it came out for me to less than $10 an hour, which just was no good for me. So I'm getting paid, better doing other stuff. So I've become an English teacher. Can't actually tell you my salary. That's one of the rules at the company. Not sure why, I guess, but rules are rules. But yeah, I did not think that I would be doing that. I kind of hoped I didn't have to, but you know what? I've done it, and it's good. It's better than I thought it was going to be. It's been a lot of fun sometimes. It's been really really obnoxious other times, because that's how life works, right? And because of the nature of the company that I work at, I do get to set my own hours. That's nice, but I have to stick to them every week, which, for a lazy person like me, that's an adjustment, but you get used to it. You can get used to anything, right? Yeah. But yeah, I've punted on my dreams for now of becoming a writer. But maybe this podcast thing will take off. I hope so, because I still do enjoy writing. But this is what I found about writing. This is a little tangent I want to go off on. I was thinking about this. I actually enjoy the act of writing much more than I enjoy editing, publishing, and that stuff. So really, I'm not my love of writing is just that. It's a love of writing. It's not really a love of getting my ideas out into the world or necessarily even getting paid for what I've done. That kind of validation isn't what I'm looking for with my writing. What I'm looking for is just the ability to create a sentence, a phrase, a paragraph, something that hits an idea and hits a point and expresses it well. And after I've done that, I'm not very motivated anymore to finish. Once I've accomplished exactly what I want to say with that. So that's not a well-equipped spirit for a writer. I remember somebody was saying, I never actually checked the quote, but I believe the person that told me it. Lawrence Kasdan, the writer of Star Wars Episode 5 and 7 and the Han Solo movie, I think, and some other stuff. I think he did some Spielberg stuff in the 80s. I think? I could be wrong. But he said that he doesn't actually enjoy writing. He enjoys having written. So I realize that I'm the inverse of that, and that's what makes him such a good commercial screenwriter, is that he feels the need to get past the words on the page, and he feels the need to just push it out there and get it out there, and then he gets the fulfillment from looking at what he's accomplished. So I'm the other way around. I enjoy the actual act of writing, the mechanics of it, the nitty gritty. And so that's not such a good internal spirit, if you will, for somebody who wants to turn their writing into a living. So I guess I'm just less ambitious that way, less equipped internally, and I didn't feel the need or didn't have the motivation to pursue it and become equipped for that kind of thing. So here I am, not writing much. Where are we? Teaching English, travel. Yeah, traveling more than I thought I would. Meeting friends, they say, come over and stay, and I take them up on it, which they probably weren't expecting. And you get to see cool stuff when you hang out with locals. I find that a lot of locals don't do touristy stuff. Just, they don't. They do the the weird stuff. They like to take you to those weird places that they found because they feel like they've really accomplished something by finding that. And if you make it clear that you don't really need to see the touristy stuff, because I don't feel the need to see the thing that I've seen in photographs. I've never actually been to Paris, but if I go to Paris, which I do plan on someday, I don't feel the need to climb the Eiffel Tower. You'll see it, and that's that. It seems like it'd be a long, long. What am I saying? Long expedition to go to it, to climb up the stairs or take the elevator or whatever. Is there an elevator still? I know that the French Resistance or whatever cut it in the 30s, but I'm pretty sure it's back now. Pretty sure. Yeah. So when you travel with locals, you get more fun that way. You get to see more weird stuff, street art, and in Dublin there's a church that's been converted into a whiskey distillery. So that's cool. I don't think you would have really found out about that, or I wouldn't have if we hadn't been touring with a friend of ours that's a local. You get to find out about just odd stuff, which I think is much cooler than the Guinness factory and Grafton Street and all that kind of stuff. It's good to know about them, but I don't feel the need to go. That's a travel tip for you people. Don't go to Guinness. It's expensive. It's like €17 if you book ahead of time, and it's like 23, I think, if you get the tickets there. It's crazy expensive, and it's not even a guided tour. I mean, I was talking to a guy. He's lived in Dublin his whole life. He's about 65. He doesn't drink, so he just went to the Guinness factory the first time at like 60 something, whatever. And he's like, I don't get the point of it. I mean, obviously, him not being a drinker wouldn't be much into it at all. But yeah, it's a nice view at the top at the Galaxy Bar, they call it. But you can get nice views other places. Or you could just look up drone video of it. Just as good. Don't go to Guinness. And that concludes my section on things that I didn't think that I'd be doing. Now we'll move on to the section where I talk about things that I thought I'd do more of. I actually haven't done all that much of. So one is hang out in Dublin. See, I didn't realize how long it takes you to get across the country. I live in Donegal, which is the northernmost county in the country. Even parts of it are even farther north than Northern Ireland. So it's actually the northernmost point on the island is in Donegal. It's also one of the bigger counties. And I did not realize how much time it takes you to get to Dublin. It takes you 3 hours by car, even though Ireland is the size of Ohio. Yeah. Because you have to go, you have to take a pretty roundabout way. If you go the straight way, you're going through a lot of towns and back roads and stuff. And if you take the bus, they take you the more roundabout way, which is actually faster. And you have to go through Omagh and near Dundalk, not Monaghan, and then straight down to Dublin. It's a ridiculous amount of time that it takes to get there. So I thought I'd do more touring around. Really, this past weekend was the first time that I've really spent a good amount of time in Dublin. Stayed there overnight, and then yeah, that's actually the first time I've stayed overnight in Dublin. Which is kind of disappointing because it is a cultural center of the world, and it's got excellent museums. For the size of city that it is and the size of country that it's in, the museums are really cool. The Irish Gallery is mostly filled with Irish painters, and it's kind of interesting to see the influence that Irish painters have had. Because obviously painting wasn't invented by the Irish, so they had to have external influences. So you see how they kind of put their own spin on each of the eras of painting. There's not a ton of impressionism I found in the gallery, not a ton of that later stuff. It's mostly portraits and landscapes. So if you're into less traditional painting, there's not a lot for you at that gallery. But I think there's some other good stuff for you. There's the Natural History Museum, which is mostly taxidermy. Like giant deer. So if you're into that kind of thing, there's that. There is, what's the other one? The Emigration Museum is not free. I'm trying to remember if the prison is free or not. There's a prison where that's kind of symbolic to the history of Ireland because it was where some revolutionaries were held. Dublin has a lot of that kind of history, a lot of history of the revolution. The 1916 Easter Uprising happened largely in Dublin, whereas the other revolutions happened kind of all over the country. That one was a little bit more. I mean, it wasn't entirely localized in Dublin. No revolution is ever localized in one city, but 1916, to me, from my perspective, and I could be wrong in that, seems like it was more localized in the center of Dublin. So as you go around Dublin, you'll find a lot of spots where people who were important to the revolution were executed or arrested or shot, made their last stand, whatever it was that they did. You find a lot of that in Dublin itself. Whereas the other revolutions throughout Irish history, you actually find a lot of history of them in Donegal, in Wexford, in what was the place? Was it Castlebar? There's a place where, not Castlebar. There's a place in like Mayo or Galway or something where some revolutionaries landed with reinforcements and then got chased away. No, it wasn't revolutionaries. I'm sorry. It was King Charles? Boy, I forget now. The Williamite War. King James the Second, I think. Pretender to the throne, tried to take England through Ireland using Catholicism as his sort of rallying call, because William was a Protestant. James was a Catholic. So mostly Catholics joined James, Protestants joined William, but it wasn't 100% that way. Some Catholics fought on William, some Protestants on James, but mostly it split along religious lines. We have a podcast an episode of a show that I'm working on that will explain that in a little bit more detail. More on that later. Oh yeah, so as far as hanging out in cities goes, I also haven't spent a lot of time in Belfast. I've been there exactly once, except the airport, which is outside the city, the international airport. That's kind of a bummer. That's also a cool city. I'd like to spend more time there, but, it's just hard to get out and do stuff when you're busy every day, like I am. You gotta make the time for that kind of stuff. And I have not been to Cork or Galway, which is again a bummer. I hear Galway is a really nice city. Actually, Cork is just a city, from what I hear. It's alright, I guess, but Galway is supposed to be like a really cool, like old Ireland brought to the modern day kind of thing. Something else that I thought I'd do more of is, just kind of get out and walk and explore my city. But it's so freezing. It's so cold all the time, especially this winter. It was snowing like a minute ago, literally. I'm looking out my window now. It's just covered in snow. The yard. It's so cold. I'm from California, so this is seriously terrible for me. And it always rains in Donegal. Every day. Every day it's raining. I cannot remember seeing the ground dry. It's not fun. It's damp. That's probably the worst thing about Ireland is not that it rains, but that it's always raining. It's not like there's a rainy season. Every season it rains. That's my least favorite thing about this island. What else haven't I done? I haven't learned Irish. Haven't felt the need. I know more Polish than I do Irish. That's not to say that nobody speaks Irish, or that, it's a dead language. It's obviously not. And it's a fuller language than people give it credit for. It's got a lot more words for things than you'd think it does. But a lot of people don't know those words. They don't have access to those words, so they throw in the English when they're speaking Irish. And what you notice is that as far as technical things go, almost nobody uses Irish in technical situations. Most use English. Irish for those that speak Irish, is a language of the house. So you can describe household things, cooking and cleaning and, you know, the kids, talking about the kids and the farm and whatever. You can do that in Irish, and people have access to those words. They know them readily in their mind very easily. But when it comes to, you know, things that maybe you'd want to talk to them about, somebody from out of town, that's where they maybe not have so much of the lexicon available in their minds readily. And so they'd probably just tell you that stuff in English. So Irish is a culture. Irish language is a cultural element more than it is a living. Oh, I don't want to say living. More than it is a requirement for living in the country. A lot of people do make the effort to learn Irish when they move here, and I find that most Irish people find that hilarious because they're like, I don't use Irish. So you're learning a language to communicate with me that I don't use. So they find that funny. Cause yeah, there's some Irish people dislike the language because they were forced to learn it in school, and like anything you're forced to learn in school, you hate it because I mean, rarely does school teach you things in a fun and interesting way. They teach you in a boring, grammar-based way. It was the same with Spanish with me in school. Like, I cannot remember what I learned in Spanish from school. The Spanish that I know is what I picked up from my friends in California, or my mom drilling into me because she lived in Ecuador for some time. That's a fun story. So I was mentioning earlier that I thought that I'd become a writer. So something that I thought I'd do more of was write about Ireland, write about my experience in Ireland. But I found that I just don't have a whole lot to say about it that I can really pin down in a written way and like sell to a magazine or a website. Because my experiences have been pretty much, the same as what other people have gone through when moving to Ireland, when living in Ireland. I don't have a whole lot original to say about it. So I'm kind of embarrassed to try to bring it up because I feel like my observations wouldn't be any more useful than anybody else's. Yeah. As far as, I don't have a whole lot original to say that I could sell to anybody. And then the final thing that I thought I'd do more of, and this is probably the saddest one, is I thought I'd keep in touch with people better. But just one thing is the time difference. It's hard to call because when I'm thinking of it, they're either asleep or at work or whatever. And then whenever they'd be able to open, I'm either asleep or at work or, whatever else I'm doing. I'm in the middle of my day. So it is hard. You can kind of, and like keeping a text conversation, I find that that's difficult because it's actually pretty hard to like keep a real conversation going. You can kind of just trade information over text if you're not in the moment. WhatsApp is good for that. Instagram direct messaging is good. Any internet-based messaging program they're all pretty much the same. They're all just as good as each other. I don't think that I have a real preference for one over the other, but yeah, it's difficult to have a real conversation with your friends if you're not engaged in that moment. If you're just sort of texting while you're doing something else, it's just not real. It's not the same. Because I do think that you can have a real conversation through text, but you've both got to be there in the moment, texting back and forth, exchanging information, in that moment. If it's not like that, it's not the same. I find that I do very little Skyping. In fact, have I done any? I've done a little bit of FaceTiming, but I don't think I've actually done any Skyping. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's just not, because you kind of got to schedule it, and you've got to, it's more work than just shooting off a text and saying, what's up? How you? It's just more work that way. Yeah. And this is as much my fault as it is anybody else's. I'm not blaming anybody for not putting forth the effort to get in touch with me. They've got their lives to live. I've got mine. But it's unfortunate. That's all I'm saying. It's unfortunate. All right. Well, I think I had more stuff to talk about, but I've forgotten about it. I had some of it written down here, but can't remember everything. Can't remember to write down everything. All right. Well, that's enough for me for today. Hope you enjoyed listening to my ramblings, my opinions, and so forth. Do continue to listen. Keep tuning in. I want to do this as often as possible. Probably twice a week, if not more. So, keep listening. Share it with your friends. Some other third thing. Bye.